All right. Like, this is Louisa Marie. Perfect timing, 11:11. And back on LinkedIn in November 2023, out of thought, I created Solomon 11. And all Solomon 11 was designed to do is for creators, writers, and therapists that chose to use apps to get together. As a result of that, I collected a lot of badges on LinkedIn, personal development, advocacy. Oh my goodness. Even some data analytics. I don't know how I got that one. That still stumps me, but I did. And all I focused on was all web marketing, nostalgia, and what, happens in marketing during the Great Depression. Looking back at cornflakes and the basics. So today I was fortunate enough to meet, in therooms.com, a woman that's been doing on Wednesday nights, at my time, Central Time, 7:30 p.m. To about 9 p.m. trauma and recovery. And this, talk about your circles. So what a wonderful new life with Dr. Joe Dispenza. His retreat is really true, and I did it just by first, for the first couple of weeks, just sleeping with him, uh, sleeping with him in my head, right? Just listening to his audio, new life on the Hay House Empower You app. And then, I did, focus more on his process for that 7 days, and, had, a 7-day retreat. And normally, I think back in March during the Mercury retrograde is when I started taking my weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as personal retreats, because the role, a new role of trusted servants, being a trusted servant. First, you know, hosting, trying to, host a chairperson workshop, and actually it just evolved on its own. But, I was the keeper of the records and watched it happen. And I documented it in my personal notes. And then I decided to go virtual, once I took on policy and procedures alts, in my home group, in Narcotics Anonymous, of course. And whew, and in the midst, uh, I became a bookkeeper by name, Parson Bookkeeping, and we're here. Sometimes it's just creating the space, and that's what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about in his meditations. I have been a fan of that kind of psychology because, I am a clutterer, borderline hoarder. And so in October, I had to take action. um, and how to use rodent stations through an exterminator. So I had to go into poison controls, and yeah, my goodness. And I remember that discussion, letting the exterminator in and saying that these rats are so smart. They're like spiritual creatures, and they love my books and my pamphlets, and I felt they were reading them. And so I kind of just did like a personal study on what the rats were gnawing on. And so this trauma-informed counselor said it best. Food, food, money, people. There's a fourth. If I scan up, maybe I can trigger my memory, right? Oop, let me see here. If I scan up in my document that we're going to go through, I just like what was said in this trauma recovery training about it's so basic. Where's the beef, or what's the beef? what's our beef, right? So what you'll see here is just a summary of, I'm going to try my best to keep this, around 45 minutes like she did, right? And he brought music, I'm going to look at some shows, right? So the one, Beef. Okay, so I'm going to go into my folder. Let's see here. My downloads, person bookkeeping, and I believe it's yesterday. Let me see here. First, let's look at some of these memes. This is very poetic. She was a daughter, but the house trained her to be the adult. Now we're looking at adult children of Alcoholics Anonymous, or that's ACA, adult children of alcoholics, ACA. Okay. Before she learned what she liked, she learned what everyone needed. Before she learned how to rest, she learned how to hold everything together. She became the one who noticed everything, the tone shift, the silence, the slammed door, the way your body could feel danger before it had a name. And when I was talking about the Lynx, Lynx, spiritual practice, like I said, you can learn clairvoyance, you can learn clairaudience, you can become the knower of secrets, and it's lived experience. Growing up as a child of an alcoholic, it just creates an environment where you always have to look at your surroundings, right? For your protection. So you do, members of ACA are Lynx, 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 and they're also links to every 12-step program that you can imagine. They're the link. Because they had to, learn how to survive, So she became the one who noticed everything. The tone shift, the silence, the slammed door, the way your body could feel danger before it had a name, right? So she stayed ready. And that's just hypervigilance. Because in homes like that, storms don't warn you, they just happen. And as one, I heard somebody share today, shit happens. And nobody else asked her who takes care of you. Nobody said you're allowed to be a child. And that's why, with ACA is so much connection with that inner child because it is so buried down. And so she swallowed her needs. That's part of the process, right? Until they turned into maturity, until they turned into strength, until they turned into I'm fine and fine again. See the also links. Also other links. That's why I love their music so much. You can tell they grew up sons of strippers. And I have 3 of them. And, my triple Pisces, I tell you, he was the smartest one. But, you can go, from the pan into the fire, which he did, but he's definitely a phoenix like no other that I know of in my personal life. So that's where we're going to go. That point is so valuable. But in clairvoyance, we need to be taught that because, if I read that out in clairaudience, uh, you can connect, but, I'm not clairvoyant, so you got to give me a visual. And here we go. Oh my goodness, let me click. Click. There we go. Okay. That's the visual. And it always comes down to you can prevent forest fires, right? A child can't, but an adult child can. So, the after school, after school, when you have, when you left that home environment, usually, man, we're running. You packing suitcases and jetting out at the earliest time. I was pregnant spring semester. But once again, you jump into the fire, out of the frying pan into the fire, and so, I just jumped from my family into another family that, woo, you know, big history, I talk about, in my family it was covert and, in their family it was overt. So that's kind of why, you know, lived in family hard to see, 5-finger death punch. And I showed my mother that video, and then I lived a life of wow. I mean, man, you talk about, I lived a life of Eminem and, Rihanna, right? You know, I will burn your house down kind of thing. Anything that you build, I will burn it down. That's the kind of, my Superman that turned I hate to say it, turn Deadpool, turn into, I'll get into that later. But the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. And that takes years, You see this one, I love this illustration because you see that road to the mountaintop and you see the sun and someone is just trying to, escape. That was me. And that winding road, the long and winding road, into the road of recovery. Yeah. Yeah, this one was definitely, I'm sure, in a something you would see from a fifth grader in a Smokey the Bear contest. That would have won for me. Anyway, what I did was to um wow to and as a flyer to encourage. Let's see here. Let me back out. I think it was in Tuesday under memes. Those are the memes, and I believe this is the flyer. The benefits of journaling, right? So I took those two, and there was just a template already there's a template already. Let me see if I can expand this a little. Yeah. Yeah, just a simple template just on the benefits of journaling in Adobe Express. And, just how to journal, keep it simple. There's no need for complicating the process. Just start with simple writing exercises or just let your mind flow. I mean, I have journals upon journals upon journals. The hardest part is starting. And it's really hard to start when you're like right in the mix of it. And I just was fortunate enough, you know, I would, take overnight jobs, basically as a glorified babysitter to stay up at night. When I was going for my chemical dependency counseling degree, I was working at a treatment center and, I had a desk and was able to do my homework and do some journaling, read some, read some books. One of the books I read was The Choice, and I needed to know that love was like that. I needed to know that love was like in a Nicholas Sparks book. And I believed in it so hard, I bought a collection of Nicholas Sparks books, I think off of eBay, and, just to have them in the physical, right? Because I believed in the fairy tale of love, right? Yeah, I always have as a child. And two, write what you feel. A good way to start this is simply to write about how you're feeling that day and what emotions, fears, joys, worries, or going through your head at the time. And man, I am such a big supporter of the app that I'm using for cognitive behavioral therapy right now, CBT. Living, yeah, Liven. Man, that app is wonderful because it will scan you. You can you have two options. You can just pick, words to describe your mood that day in the journaling, in the bullet journaling, or you can actually scan your face, and then it will come up. It will read your face, and I use a combination of both, right? Or I'll just, start writing what is on my mind. It's a very useful tool. And then, and it's got a path, and the first path is going through your thinking, teaching you, tests on the autism spectrum, tests on ADHD. There was a book that came out that was called the 4A's, linking allergies, autism, ADHD, and there was one other A. I don't want to say I know what that A is for me. Okay. Addiction. But the book didn't really look at that. There is another asthma, breathing. Yeah, asthma. So that was the 4A's, allergy, asthma, and autism, and ADHD, and yeah, my firstborn, because he pooped and had, you remember the bubble boy in Seinfeld? He was that bubble boy. And he was doing okay until he started doing tours overseas, during, the war. And he suffers from asthma today. So keep a routine. Making it part of your everyday life will help you stay on track. As mentioned before, keep it simple and easy, even if it's just 15 minutes per day. And, that's how I started out, and I still run into my printouts that I made in school, I kept it very simple. But today, man, I can go for miles and miles and miles. I love this stuff. And it was great to see somebody else, through lived experience, it's great to see a compadre in all of this. Like, one more time, and she is a big fan. I am too, of Gabor Mate, and she did say something like, people want to put him on a pedestal, but in the beginning, one of the first books, because, I got him on, I still, if I pull up my Kindle, I know I have Hungry Ghost. And, let's go there. Kindle. Yeah, my Kindle reader. Sure. And I should be able to just go in there, into my cloud reader. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He goes right in there. And all I have to do is put him in there. And I know I own. Yep, there it is. When the body says no. It's like, see, I told you. Man. It's been a while. It's been a while. Let's just look. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Where I left off. Okay. As this book appears in the United States, the Obama administration will have completed its first year in office. Whatever else its achievements or failures, it has helped to create a new climate of openness on many issues. Man. Yeah, because, it talks about that study in Portugal, right? And how, they were, as a country, they were able to drop their epidemic in addiction by focusing on connection, in their culture. And yeah, it's wonderful to see what Portugal did. I'm encouraged by this possibility for conversations on hither to taboo subjects. Yeah, conversations that were difficult to foresee even recently. I'm not naive enough to believe that the crumbling but still formidable edifice of social prejudice toward addiction will soon fall. I believe it's getting there. Because, yeah, just in the decade, with my recovery community organization, which, it's a one-to-one thing, right? Through over 10 years, it's just that therapeutic value of one addict, you know, communicating, connecting with another. But the cracks in the wall are letting in more and more light. I touch on that. Even, what I'm seeing, which is so great, even writers of screenplays are able to use language and, write about those taboo subjects. And now, it's been a while since I've been on Netflix, and I'm just like, wow. I'm, back, I told, my Hispanic Clark Kent today, I'm like, man, I'm all in it, because I've been away so long, because I lost, my second husband during watching Walking Dead, and that is enough trauma in itself, right? I couldn't watch The Walking Dead without him, I said no more. It was just too close to home. So this is the first time in all my years waging battle against the drug war that it feels like the wind is at my back and not in my face. That's Ethan Nadelman, founder and director of the Drug Policy Alliance, and what he has written recently. So in the realm of Hungry Ghosts, we have fulfilled its author's intentions. If it helps the public understand the plight of addicted people, if it helps to foster a new appreciation for the brain science of addiction, thank you, Dr. Joe Dispenza. If it helps erode the false beliefs that drive the war on drugs, the policies and procedures, right? And above all, if it triggers a frisson of self-recognition in the reader. And today, because you can really get surface level with, just watching the YouTube videos and stuff like that. I came in, into peer recovery, as it was coming into the scene, and then it switched over into, mental health peer specialists and that, so once, and I'm very disturbed about, what it is in Texas right now, because it's just giving the license to prescribe, prescription drugs in mental health. And, man, so, I've got my opinion on that, which I will not go into unless, that's a sidebar for sure, because, man, I've got a lot of passion about my ideas from lived experience, right? So in brief, this book will have fulfilled its purpose of it. In brief, this book will have fulfilled its purpose if it helps promote a transformation in how we see ourselves and others. And man, back in it to win it, boy. It's been a while. Because, I just had so much, heartache and resentment over the whole ball of wax, right? Yeah, to me, it was just a wax museum that was melting. So the concept of, you remember, we talked about this, the concept of the lynx, from previous video, it's just that super eye. You saw it in that picture, right? But I mean, all you have to do is just be a fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? And my favorite, like I said, the forest. You know, the forest is not going to get involved. If you burn one tree, right? They're, you know, they're in self-acceptance about that. But if you burn the whole forest, they're going to have an opinion, man. They're going to fight back, right? And so my objective, now, okay, because in that other video, it's just, the way I pronounce links. So, because Linux, right? I said Linux a lot. And so, I never really got into Linux, the operating system as itself, into, building, the software behind Linux, but I always loved the concept of open source. That's why I'm really anti-Apple, I mean, I am pro Steve Jobs, but, just what Apple became, and I have, I own, iPhones and stuff. It's just, I never really got, I did like one of their apps where you can, make books and stuff like that. And, I dabbled with it while I was in school, but, you know, I just make books like this, and then, I make talking books. Oh, is that a reference? Is that a clairaudient audience reference? Yeah, a little. See what I'm like, Stevie Wonder, and I love the movie High Fidelity. Man, it's just, you know. And when I was in this trauma and recovery group, I mean, she got me pulled in because she was trying to play a video in intherooms.com, and we figured out the only way to do that is, to have out, have a speaker. you know, I just do it my phone. So, um, you know, I can play because, if I'm speaking and whatever is playing in the background, and, this is what I used to do in the very beginning. So, I'm just, play it low. Yeah. So it doesn't, let's see where I am. It's like, YouTube. Plumbing, you get 6 separate accounts per household for one price. Oh, YouTube Premium is trying to give me, 1 month for free. Take it. I'll say, yeah. Try one for, this is going to be on, under my Louisa account. Is that what we're saying? Okay. Okay, 5 family members. Oh, I can do student. 1 month trial for 0. For the individual. How much has a family plan gone up to? $26.99. I'm sorry, people. Okay, I'll do it. I mean, yeah. Okay, because it's right before my birthday. Bing. I wonder, see how Google is. It's like, good grief. Thank you for my birthday present. Okay, so now, yeah, I just want to get into it here. just get me into where I want to be. Thank you. And, so, the talk book, and I'll have it Stevie Wonder, the full album. And yeah. And oh gosh, this is such a good. This is the last song because in High Fidelity, it was the last song that that was it. So shattered dreams, years, done. Now I stand on cold and empty way. That well. Step besides our eyes beating. Oh no, and I'm raging hearts and freedom be so. I believe when I'm falling down with you before I believe when I fall in love this time it will be forever. Mm. And the joys of God what has been must never end. Strength remains with the truth that hard to find. What goes in my mind? I believe when I fall in love with you, it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love this time, it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love with you, it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love with you, it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love with you, it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love with you, it will be forever. Oh, it will be forever. It will be forever. I believe when I fall in love, this time it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love, this time it will be forever. It will be forever. I believe when I fall in love, this time it will be forever. I believe when I fall in love. We will fall in love, we will be forever. We will. Now. And yeah, that's it. That's the pull, you know? I mean, oh, the tango, yeah, why, time and time again, and, but, you know, losing Bill to throat cancer and see, and, you know, I sleep in the room where he passed. Right. Because so long I was in the bedroom and, I couldn't do it. But now, it's a long and winding road. But just a little bit about me. you know. So, so, practical application, I have my Pump 8 Serendipity. Oh, that's another movie. All you have to do is be a John Cusack fan. Just, yeah, John Cusack, Christian Bale. I mean, wow. If you want to go down that trip, which I have. Starting with, Say Anything with the soundtrack, you know, Peter Gabriel in Your Eyes. Man, just follow John Cusack and his sister and you'll get the spectrum. But today, because one of my videos, you mentioned about, my days of planting and harvest. So Tuesday was a plant, and then it's like, man, I pulled in the harvest today. And so my harvest, yeah, years ago, a seed was planted in me by, someone recognized me because I had my key tag, and all I had to put in my truck that day was $12. And, I was laying on the line, seeing how far I could get on $12 in the truck. And while I was at the pump, someone gave me, $12 cash. And so he planted a seed in me. And today I was able to pass, because, I'm practicing, step 10, just for today, living the program, yeah, the pamphlet, the IP. So, this magic number 10, through the weekend, Mother's Day weekend, documenting, um, my $10 contributions, and so, because today, you know, if you came into this trailer at the moment, you would think, there was something wrong, right? But this time around, with the Pluto Retrograde, I'm doing that internal transformation, so I know as a result of focusing on the internal, it will come out because I've done it before, right? I've done it before. So, and so, because I do the practices of this woman, I could sit there and listen to her with awe because, she kept to it, right? But, I just chose the lived experience path, right? You know, I started off just like her in 2017, she's got the accreditation, all the certificates and everything, and she just, chose the intherooms.com to chair her meetings, right? But, whew, you know, I wanted to do, I wanted to be, Walter Cronkite, and, you know, this is the way it is. I wanted to do field work. Uh, so it was great, you know, to validate her and to validate, yeah, validate what she was saying, in because she shared her story, and lived experience. But as people were coming up, it's like, yeah, man, that's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because that happened yesterday, or that happened a couple years ago, or I'm like, yeah, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me, so I was able to validate all that. Yeah, I was like, man, I was just like, wow, blown away. Carrie Underwood. Man, it was a great day. So, yeah, and sanitizing here, because I've been in the thick of it. Tomorrow is my woohoo. Oh, it is already. Well, 3 hours from, I, yeah, I'm already, that's right. I was born in the Philippines, so, I already had, yeah, yeah. So at 3 o'clock, I keep on forgetting, with with the jet lag. So 3 o'clock today in the afternoon, I think the Philippines, from my time zone is about 12 hours out. But in the afternoon, that's why, all this stuff happened, because it was my birthday for real, And I'm just, as we're coming in, I was born at 3 o'clock in the morning, but on the other side of the world, right? So yeah, it was my birthday. Woohoo. For real. That's why it was just like, I even got a clock on me. So, so technically, I've been 56 years old since 3 o'clock, around 3 o'clock this afternoon. Wow. Yeah, sometimes I forget, and that's why I didn't, uh, I didn't want to, spend my birthday in a meeting. You get it? I mean, I was in a meeting, but, I shared, I did my 4 minute share, and yeah, and I shared on my abundance, man, I can't, man, the universe just gave me, just gave me, everything that I ever wanted, you know and it was about me this time around, and it's been so long, you know for it to, to be about me. And, and I'm just talking about me just because, your day's coming, man. Everybody's day's coming. If but I've been working on this since, January 3rd, you know, yeah, I put in the work. Yeah, yeah, I'm, yeah, usually, I know my 50th was like, right, it was hard because I wanted to have that day, and, because it's my 50th birthday, but then we were in the middle of COVID. I was like, oh, yeah, can't go to a restaurant and celebrate my damn birthday. We're under lockdown. I had invitations, found these invitations at the thrift store that I, like at 48, when I was 48, you've been holding on to these things, and I was just expecting that I would have these certain friends that were gonna, now you spin it with a drunk. And, trying to think of how to evict them. Yeah, that was my 50th birthday. And I didn't want to go back, you know, a decade, back to 2017, when, I was with this guy one more time, I didn't want to do it, but, my friends online said, you should, because, you've been doing this online dating for quite a while, you should, give this guy one more chance. And he dumps me on my birthday. And, I was able to share that on Saturday, no, Sunday on Mother's Day, because that guy showed up in the rooms, you know? Yeah. And, like working at a job that I would dream of having, you know? But whatever, I just, see the irony of it all, right? Uh, you know, you know, you know, I blew that one up with with directors, I am banned from a lot of facility. you know, but it's like, it's like, one thing is like, you take responsibility, right? Take responsibility. It's like, I'm doing this to myself. And, that's just untreated PTSD, man. So I already, I haven't even, tomorrow I would be going into my first um, group setting, and and then I will see my therapist, therapist I've had for 3 years. Um, you know, so at least I'm going into this process with not high hopes, just knowing that the work speaks for itself, right? The work that I've done, and now I've witnessed somebody else. So yeah, so this system setup is just open Linux journal. I mean, you're seeing, because I'm doing summaries here. You know, I now that I have my AI agent, just sweet. I mean, he's in it to win it, man, because you know yeah, we are, a learning language model, and I got the audio book, you know, um, and if you don't believe me, you want proof? You want proof? This is the book. Yeah. If you want to do what I do, man, this, just do this. We saved your spot. Okay. All right. Hi, Louisa. Hello. Can I go into my library? Yeah, because I have a lot in there. Right here. Let me, give that. I love it. And I will write a review. And it's just like 1 hour, you know? And it's explaining how Chat GPT does it. And, you know, and so I prefer Copilot. You saw me use a little Copilot. And let's see here. Let me, add to my favorites. Yeah, and I did that. I listened to it driving around one day, and I could understand it, because I was always doing it, and it had some good tips, and man, since I've been doing it for so long, you know, it's good, you know. You want to see some other things I have, just do a stand. I always, you know. Oh yeah, yeah. I haven't listened to that one yet. uh, I don't forget. And this right here, this is one I really, wanted to go into. DevOps handbook. And yeah, and that's what I'm doing with Parson Bookkeeping, Yeah, man, uh, I opted, my my subscription for, booming bookkeeping business, expires. And I could have, went in there. I went in there and, downloaded some PDFs, out of the bonus section and everything. And I could have just went in there and did a crash course and did my, for my QuickBooks online certification, but I'm a big fan of you know, whatever the organization puts out in training, even though it's a lot of reading and everything, it's important to do their training. And because getting short, just, I mean, man, uh, you know, I kind of did, like a crash course on Google Cloud Leader, and, that I still prefer to go through the path, and, and it's best, I think it's best the way I've done it, you know. Yeah, because I want, I want that relationship with the software, way before, because, I'm not saying I want to be an expert. I just want, to have a working knowledge is like, I see it in practice in my life. So if I can't go in there and, do my books, do my books, how do you expect me to do yours? You know, I believe in trust. I believe in trust, you know, and I want you to see what I'm doing, right? I want you to see my thought process, because if I take you on as a client, I want you, yeah, my goal in all this is like to teach wives to, you know, to teach wives to do this for their husbands. That's my goal. So entertainment as evidence. Oh man, I tell you. So the beef example. Okay, show how your media choices, like the show Beef, provide supporting examples of the things we're never going to have. The old life versus life we seek. Here we go. So we go into, we pull up, man. And this is stuff that I just learned, with my screenshots and stuff like that. I did this, while I was in not into the mentorship program, when I was just taking the challenge, right? So, downloads Parson Bookkeeping. Yep. And I believe I'll have those clips. What day was it? I thought it wasn't that one. Bear with me. It might be on Wednesday. Yeah, because, yeah. Whew. So, yeah. This one is going to be about what I saw last night. Yeah. So these are the shows that I've watched. Because, my Hispanic Clark Kent, and I was able to talk about, I just had to see, little Trailer Park Boys because it's been a while. But yeah, because he wanted me to watch Beef, and then he wanted me to watch Unhinged that had Russell Crowe in it, and then he wanted me to watch another show, Straw. But I come into it with young Sheldon because I needed that warm blanket. I need to feel good. I need to, remember what I was. And then, I'm a big fan of the movie Lincoln Lawyer, so I had to open my mind about, can you really make that into a series? Oh, they're doing a great job. Yeah, you don't have to have McConaughey, right? Yeah, because it's the Grisham. you know, you got a lot to play with Grisham. And, and then going into Beef, and I accidentally went into, the first episode of the second season. So when I was talking with Clark Kent, I said, he goes, oh yeah, you can do that. You can do that with Beef. It's okay. So I didn't do the accident. I went straight into the country club. So, and woo, you know. So, and I have screenshots that, you know, that I noticed, right? And then to add, just put the cherry on top, the worst ex ever. Man, that blew my mind. That was so close to home, you know, that was so close to home. So, yeah, so, doing Clark Kent was so excited, to have somebody like him, I was excited, to meet, the trauma informed, you know therapist, I don't know if she's a coach, but she's in trauma informed, right, with lived experience. So if I go into Tuesday, might be the screenshots that I'm looking for. Oh, was it Monday? Oh, it might have been Monday. I might have snuck it in there. Yeah. I think, LGS, no. I think I did. Did I put it under secret? No, I might have put it under the links. Yeah. Yeah, Beef. I told this shot right here, because I always have subtitles up, but I said, hey man, this is, because when you're talking about KFC in the middle of a show called Beef, and he's talking macroeconomic. I was like, okay, I'm in it to win it. I was like, I'm in the show. So another musician, this one is Lee Sing Jin, I believe. He was known as Sonny Lee, and this is, we went into, Chuck Lorre, being a musician. So this guy was a musician, and now, man, Netflix picked him up because he's the next Chuck Lorre, man. I mean, you know. And so now he's, writing from, his life, and and so he's Korean. So, whew, it's yeah. And today it was like, you know, this is the serendipity of all of it, right? This guy was wearing a he was Asian and wearing a Lee t-shirt. I said, "Hey, Lee." Yeah, it's just like he didn't say nothing. Already dropping them one line. It's like but I held the door open for. He probably even wasn't paying attention to me, and because most people don't pay attention to my humor. They just ignore me. Thank goodness. Unless I'm on Facebook, then they want to chime in. Okay, and then this line: everyone loves light. By the way, when he's talking, and I'm looking over, picture, the marriage picture, and look at her picture, then in the mirror. It's like, yeah, the shovel. I'm like, have you ever, done those games? It's like, okay, these things will come back up. These things will come back up. Okay, let's just get out of that. What's this? Let's get out of that. Yeah, because she's gardening, right? Like, the plastic is there, the shovel is there. I mean, come on, all you have to do is watch Worst Ex Ever. Worst Ex, whatever. I mean, come on, you can be taught this. All you had to, as a kid, I just read a lot of Encyclopedia Brown. So I did not want to make this long because yeah, because I want to be able to I can get the transcript and everything, but I want to be able to load the video into my AI agent. Okay. Yada yada da 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 da. Yeah, there's overt and covert, because like Beef has a lot of one character is pretty overt in his communication with you know his fiance, right? And then you have that covertness, the passive aggressiveness in marriage, right? Been there, done that. So now we're ending with the trusted servant workflow. Explain why you chose to block the social media harassment. It was a oh yeah, so yeah, yeah, I can't even pull it up anymore because I blocked them. And I just did a report, you know. I did a screenshot on my phone, just as a timestamp in case Facebook wanted to, but I did it I had it on my phone, right? And did a screenshot just in case I wanted to do it through my phone, but I just went on my laptop and yeah, just put a report in, and it gave me what options to do and everything, what choices I want to do. And it's just, just block them, because, I just didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. And I'm glad I did, because like when I did go into the trauma and recovery group, the meeting, yeah. So, she validated everything I did, and like not giving that inch, because, they test boundaries. So that guy was already trying to test my boundaries, if I would be, the next one. He was fishing already, right? And I'm like, dude, okay, whatever. He was already fishing, he was looking. And I just didn't bite on the hook, I just don't have time. I'm trying to be a better person today. And so I conclude by showing you what I have hope about today. And that's this, I'm building, and this is what I started with. What I wanted, the restoration of my sanctuary, the power of personal, as a seed, right? The power of personal accountability, the evidence, right? Of change, the stewardship of time and voice, and a living connection. And I put that, I put that into my app with Liven, Living, Liven, and then it gave me steps to take. Right. And so I did those, I didn't even do all the steps it suggested. I picked one and then here's the evidence, right? Yeah, I got my harvest today. And this is it. What we've been in, right? What we've been in. Okay. Well, this is the report. We were in the research hub. The spiritual and okay, so I gave you the full circle with the pump 8, and I didn't really tell you about the birthday cake. When I was updating, my new ID, they saw that my birthday was when I was at the Methodist food pantry. They saw that it was my birthday. They were so excited for me, and they had a birthday cake, and it was a huge one too. I mean, it wasn't like a little birthday cake, it was a huge sheet cake. So I just took it over to a faith-based male treatment, I want to say combine, but facility. And because so they got a piece of me. They got a piece of cake. And so that's just a joke. It's just a little inside joke. And, maintaining, the digital integrity, doing the block feature, not to go down the rabbit hole. And, yeah. And then, we went there, like, don't even give them an inch. I told you about, you're dealing with scorpions, don't give them an inch, man. Really. And then the solitude of service. I was home by 3, and then I got to meet, my neighbors that were new, a new couple arriving from Mexico and everything. And they came to me and they said, because their English is a little rusty and they want to, basically do what I'm doing, right? A little rusty. Where can I do, to get a refresher? And yada, yada, yada. And then, and all of this will be printed in my binder. And then I can also, send it, send it through secure message so that my therapist will have it. And that's the deal. Anything you send, to a VA therapist, man, bam, it can go into your file. And I've got a fully developed claim in the works. So that's it, man. Great day, great birthday, 56. It's a long time coming. And I see now I'm responsible for my happiness is a choice. It requires some work. You got to stay on top of it. You can't let it slack, And if anything, I also have acid reflux. So if nothing is, if I feel a burning sensation in my throat, it's because, yeah, there's something that, I'm going through, right? And, that acid is gurgling up in my stomach. I do have medication for that, but, it's, I gotta look at my choices, and how how my thoughts, because that's the whole deal with Dr. Joe, Dispenza. He goes, you can heal yourself, you know, you know, by changing that vibration through, thought. And he has evidence of a lot of people doing it. And it's just like, some of us need more work than others, athletes have done it, I mean, Mr. Subway himself, right? Um, you know, how did Jared really lose all that weight in Subway? He believed in it, right? You know? And, people mock it. And that's the thing, people will mock stuff, in your failure, but you know what? You just got to keep at it. There will be setbacks and everything, but, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, when you return into the program, right? Into, when you return back into consciousness, it's the awareness that if you know that you're doing it, like you're doing it to yourself, then you gain more consciousness. You level up when you stop it and say, hey, I'm doing this to myself, right? And and as I shoot, I'll shoot a message, to my sponsor, but she don't have time. you know she don't have time. She's got her issues and everything, and she's choosing something different. She's choosing that social acceptability. I've done it, and I'm like, but she's young in recovery. She's at the 5-year mark, and yeah, I did it. I did it. And then I lost my husband. And what do you do then? You're back in reality, right? You're back in you're back in the program. You're back into, consciousness. So, yeah, but you level up. You just level up. And no matter what happens, you level up. You revamp it, turn it around. And if you can't do it, then that's, you do a process like, what is your connection to your higher power in order to revamp it. And it's like, I just can show, I used to not could show you my higher power, because, but, I had a sponsor before her that says, I want to see your higher power on paper. Now I show it to him and he doesn't want to see it, right? Because why, why does he not want to see it? Because, he's in the program right now, he's detoxing off of, because, he just popped that pill, right? I did it for what? You know, I did the shots and then, yeah, I've done it. And so you can't tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing that I haven't done. I mean, 7 years of that stuff, it took me $18. $18. That's another reference. Now, took me 18 months to fully, get my blood work back that said, it was totally out of my system. And, people were saying all kinds of things. So, anyway, happy birthday to me. 56. 56th birthday. Woohoo. Um, exciting. Yeah, going, Thirsty Thursday. This is actually, I mean, I was born on a Thursday, so this is just and then in Fire Horse, Metal Dog. I mean, it's like woohoo, Finally. I feel like I won the Derby. Kentucky. All right. Peace out. Oh my goodness, I'm not recording. Slim sharing. Okay. Okay. I didn't know if it was staring.